Nigel, previously you've talked about the amount of data and the challenges of that data, but specifically the bias aspects of those challenges. Can you share a little bit more about what you mean by bias within the data?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for me, we talk about data bias, and the most important thing to say is that I don't think the bias is actually in the data. The bias is in the people that are interpreting the data, selecting the data, and generally kind of manipulating it. So the bias is within us, but we just see it manifested through the data. And there are a number. There's lots of different types of kind of biases that can creep into data, but probably I'll give you a few examples, and when I've gone through them, you'll probably see how they're kind of more people focused than they are data focused to some extent. But the first one's around kind of confirmation bias. And that's really when we start to look at a data set and we start it with a particular belief in mind already. So, maybe we're doing some analysis of the sales department to see what their expenditure is, and we think that they're spending an awful lot on kind of flights maybe. And we think that's probably true. And so then when we start to look at the data, we automatically have a bias built into us because we're looking to confirm the belief that we believe to be true. But there are other types as well. So there's sample bias, and that's where we have lots and lots of data, but we actually select too small a data set in order to be representative. And a great example of that is around facial recognition, where what we see with facial recognition being so inaccurate, having previously I said it was very accurate, it is from a technical standpoint, but only accurate against the data that it's been trained with. And quite often that's from a particular data set, and quite often that's kind of white-faced people that it's been trained with. So all of the data's out there, but the data that was selected as training data was a particular type, and that's when we then see kind of racial bias kind of slip into the data. A couple of the other examples, things like availability bias. And there's probably nearly 100%, it's 98% of the web pages out on the internet are published in just 12 languages. So of all the languages that there are in the world, the internet only represents probably 12 of them. And more than half of those are actually just in English. So if you take native English speakers in the world, then they equate for probably less than 10%. So you can see availability bias kind of slipping into that. And a great example of that was currently during the coronavirus pandemic, where guidance for kind of how to wash your hands and kind of how to sanitize and face masks and all the rest of it were issued in English and translated to some other languages, but not to every language. So there were countries where they literally didn't understand what they needed to do to protect themselves from coronavirus because they didn't have the instructions available in their native language. And probably there are lots more, but probably the final one is around response bias. And that's where, again, a lot of data is produced, but it's been produced by too few people. So there's a lack of responses. And there was a point in time, it's been fixed now, that with Amazon, when you used to go into Amazon to read the reviews, that actually 4% of the users on Amazon generated over 50% of the reviews. So that's an example of response bias, where a very small number of people that represent the Amazon community were creating the majority of the reviews. An issue that's been fixed now, but historically that was because quite often people would pay to have their kind of review, pay for reviews to be kind of created, and so there was a small set of people that were profiteering from that. But hopefully, as I've gone through very quickly those few examples, what you can see is that they are very people-centric and not actually technology or data-centric. Although we may find bias in the data, it starts with us. And so if we can start with an open mind and a diverse set of team that are kind of looking at the data in the first place, then we can try and avoid some of these biases.